When Aaliyah Khan walked into Jefferson Heights Secondary School for the first time, carrying a backpack stitched twice at the seams and shoes polished thin from years of careful use, she already knew she did not belong in the way the hallways expected people to belong, because the walls were lined with portraits of former students whose smiles were confident and familiar in a way hers had never been allowed to be, and the teachers spoke a language of assumptions that placed her somewhere between invisible and inconvenient, especially Mr. Howard, the senior mathematics teacher whose reputation preceded him like a shadow that whispered, "Brilliant but harsh," though Aaliyah would learn quickly that harshness was often selective, sharpening itself only around students who spoke with accents, wore thrifted clothes, or carried last names that did not match the donor plaques on the walls. And on her very first day in his advanced problem-solving class, when she raised her hand to answer a question about quadratic transformations, he did not even look up from his desk before saying, with a smile meant to entertain the class, "Let's give others a chance. Stop embarrassing yourself." And the laughter that followed felt like a verdict rather than a joke, a sound that told her exactly where she stood, yet she lowered her hand slowly, not because she doubted her answer but because she had learned long ago that dignity sometimes meant choosing silence when the world wanted to make a spectacle of you. And so days turned into weeks where she listened more than she spoke, filled notebooks with solutions no one asked for, and watched as Mr. Howard praised students who repeated textbook steps while dismissing her questions as off-topic or too ambitious, once even remarking that not everyone needs to aim so high, a sentence that burned because it carried the weight of centuries disguised as advice. And still Aaliyah studied every night under a flickering bulb in the small apartment she shared with her mother, a woman who cleaned offices after midnight and reminded her daughter, with tired eyes and unwavering faith, that knowledge was the one thing no one could confiscate, not teachers, not systems, not laughter. And the turning point came when the school announced the annual Logic and Applied Mathematics examination, a prestigious internal competition designed by Mr. Howard himself, whose winners often received scholarships and public recognition. And when Aaliyah submitted her name, he chuckled openly during class, holding the list as if it were a joke, saying, "This exam isn't for everyone. It's rigorous," pausing just long enough for the message to land before adding, "But ambition is admirable," and though her cheeks burned, she signed anyway, because fear had already taken too much from her life to be allowed anything else. And on the day of the exam the room buzzed with confidence from students who had been privately coached, while Aaliyah sat quietly, reading the questions once, then twice, realizing with a strange calm that the final problem, the one Mr. Howard had labeled unsolvable under time constraints, was not unsolvable at all but cleverly misleading, designed to reward pattern recognition over brute calculation. And as the minutes passed she worked not faster but smarter, breaking the problem apart, recognizing a recursive symmetry hidden beneath complex notation. And when time was called she handed in her paper with a sense of completeness rather than triumph, because she had answered for herself, not for approval. Yet the real shock came a week later when Mr. Howard returned the graded exams and hesitated visibly at the podium, his usual confidence fractured, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Aaliyah, and when he called her name the laughter came again, softer this time, uncertain, but it died instantly when he announced, with a tight jaw, that she had not only achieved the highest score but had solved the final problem in a way he had not anticipated, offering an alternative proof that was both elegant and efficient. And the room shifted, chairs creaking as students leaned forward, curiosity replacing mockery, while Mr. Howard attempted to regain control by suggesting that perhaps there had been external assistance, a phrase that landed like an accusation, and before Aaliyah could respond, another teacher, Ms. Alvarez, stood up from the back of the room, her voice steady as she explained that she had proctored the exam personally and witnessed Aaliyah's work process, adding that the solution had already been shared with the district's mathematics board for review. And the silence that followed was not empty but heavy with recognition, because for the first time the narrative had cracked, and over the following days the school buzzed not with ridicule but discomfort, as students who had laughed now avoided eye contact, and teachers who had overlooked her began asking questions. Yet the true confrontation came during a public assembly when Mr. Howard was expected to present the exam results, and standing at the microphone, faced with parents, administrators, and students, he attempted to frame the outcome as a pleasant surprise, but Aaliyah, heart-pounding, raised her hand and asked for permission to explain her solution, and when granted, she walked onto the stage, hands steady despite the history pressing against her, and explained not just the mathematics but the thinking behind it, speaking clearly, confidently, dismantling the problem step by step until even those unfamiliar with advanced math could follow. And when she finished, the applause was not polite but genuine, the kind that acknowledges a shift, and Mr. Howard, faced with the undeniable, muttered a stiff congratulations, but the real reckoning came later when an investigation into classroom bias was quietly initiated, prompted by multiple students who, emboldened by Aaliyah's courage, shared their own experiences of dismissal and ridicule. And though the school never announced disciplinary action publicly, the following year Mr. Howard was no longer teaching advanced classes, while Aaliyah received a scholarship, mentorship opportunities, and something even more valuable, the knowledge that her voice mattered. And yet the story did not end in simple victory, because success did not erase the years of being told to shrink, and there were nights she still heard the laughter, still questioned whether excellence would ever be enough, but each time doubt surfaced she remembered the moment the room fell silent, the moment truth replaced assumption, and she carried that forward, not as revenge but as responsibility, tutoring younger students who reminded her of herself, speaking openly about bias not with anger but with clarity, understanding that the most powerful rebuttal to prejudice was not humiliation but undeniable competence paired with unwavering self-belief. And years later, when Aaliyah returned to Jefferson Heights not as a student but as a guest speaker, she walked past the same portraits, now joined by one more, her own, and she smiled not because she had proven them wrong, but because she had proven herself right, and in doing so, had quietly rewritten what that hallway would expect from the next girl who walked in carrying a worn backpack and a future no one else could yet see.